I found a journal entry where I talked about the day I joined the military.
Wow.
And like why I was doing it and how aware I was at 17 that I was doing it because I didn't feel safe, that I was doing it with fear, that I didn't know what I would do in war, that I didn't know how I would stay true to myself. Fast forward a decade of service, when I left active duty, I had developed such a persona for myself. It was always a mask. And until I was able to figure out who the person inside was and then actually have a relationship with her, and the way I found to do that was through writing and sharing my character. I'm Alisa Sieber, and you are Jeanette Bent. And who are you?
So I am Jeanette Bent, and I am here as a result of happen chance just meeting you, and how we met is just really, I feel like, is so resonant with what we talk about all the time. Was coming back with my family from Bruno's. We were just eating, we were turning a corner, and it was your dogs that actually drew me and my boys in, which my boys are dog people. I love dogs. I just don't, like, I love dogs, but I'm not usually one to like gravitate towards them. And I just remember, I think it was Indy, her lovely eyes. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And then I was like, oh, there are people here. And then introduced, ourselves. And it just like, I feel like kindred spirits, definitely like soul sisters. Like there's something that like brought us there. And as soon as we started talking and introducing ourselves, it was just like more. Yes. And that and is a continuation. It's an ellipse, and I don't think it stops.
No.
Hence why we're here now.
Hence we're here. Yeah. That was such a fun evening for myself as well, because my husband and I had just moved back to the Bay Area. We have spent we moved away from home when we were 18 years old, each of us, and we joined the service. We were down in San Diego for our entire 20s, most of our early 30s, and we just now find ourselves back in the Bay Area. And you felt like the first person that was like put in front of me of being like, this is someone to invest time in.
Yeah.
And I had recently around the same time learned this fun antidote that in order to have a true relationship with someone, you should spend about 70 hours with that person. And at the end of that 70 hours, like you've had a foundation of what a real friendship could sustain. And so when we started talking about getting together and working on this land with projects and theater and dance and movement and doing a podcast together to cover all the creative activities that we're going to be talking about on this podcast, it was really exciting to realize that like we'll be investing those 70 hours into each other.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
We also have really different careers. And so, for you come from a media background, and you find yourself in this like divide between your passion of writing and this career. Where do you feel you are right now in that journey of like your self-identity as both your career woman, but also your creative self?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. So I work at KION. I'm an anchor woman. I'm a journalist. So that's like the nitty gritty journalist. And it's funny. I was actually just talking to my boss about this a few days ago. I want to default to putting on this persona. I want to default to Jeanette Bent, the anchor woman. I want to default to like kind of protect myself a little bit.
Yeah.
But then it's so funny because, and also as a performance artist, that's what I was doing as a performance artist, building these characters. So I want to build her as a character. The irony is like, it's me. And in order to gain the public's trust, which is totally valid, I need to show up as myself, my authentic self. But yet there's also this like level of barrier and wanting to protect myself in that way. So it's a constant thing I'm thinking about and grappling with. And then like, if you were to say, Jeanette, I arranged for you to stay here for 24 hours, like media free, everything free, and just like create. Oh my gosh, I would just die happy. Like that's what that.
Cool, that's what I want to offer.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, actually, literally, that's exactly what this is.
What are you doing next weekend?
Right. So left to my own devices, and like COVID would be a really great example of that, because all I had was time. And
Right.
I felt like I was like the archetypal mother. I was just birthing and birthing and birthing and creating and creating. And like my book, like really, like that's when I really fleshed it out. Like Dark Star Reclaiming Lilith, the one that I published a couple of years ago, that's really where she came to fruition. And I realized that that character was the same character through 3 different books thread. So anyway, time. It's
Yeah.
time. And I realized that that's a handicap. So I'm constantly walking this like, okay, professional Jeanette, career, like, yes, I've got this career and it takes up time. And so like the time that I had, and I'm a mom, so it
Yeah.
takes up a lot of other time, as you understand. And then there's this like part of you, there's this part of like, or me, that like, I do want to create, I do want to put this effort out, I do want to do this thing. So it's like, it's kind of a balancing act in a way, finding little pockets of time throughout the day to weave in this creative impulse that I have that
Totally.
wants to bubble up all the
Yeah.
time, constantly trying to like find these little nooks and stuff. So
I never feel like I have a down moment, because every time I have time to be with myself, my brain is thinking about my next step, my next thing I'm going to write about, the scene that I'm in, and how am I going to layer my characters, and what meaning am I trying to bring through the smallest amount of words and exposition. So it's exhausting
Yeah.
at times. It's to be in like such a creative state is also uplifting, but there needs to be so much self-care in that too.
Oh yeah, definitely self-care, and that's something that just gets brushed to the side, right? So
What is
easily.
that?
I know. Yeah, what is that? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it looks different to every person, right? Yeah.
I think that's why I want to create this sanctuary of Shea Serendip. The word that we named this property, Serendip, is based off the origin story of the word serendipity, which is the 3 princes of Serendip. And everything on this land, all the projects, all the creativity, there always feels this line of chance. Like, this is such a happy accident to be here. And like, even meeting you felt like such a serendipitous, the fact that I was at that wine bar Saison, with our dogs, and you just so happened to be walking by, and you were wearing your son's leather jacket.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And I was like, cool jacket. Like, I think I literally said, like, I was like, I would have hung out with you in high school.
And then 17 years
And like, still would have hung out with you. And it's so funny too, because like, you were saying like, it feels so authentic to show up, and I'm 37, you're 41. It feels so much more authentic, even especially in this stage of our lives, to show up as our younger selves, as our teenage selves, when we were birthed into womanhood.
Yeah.
And I feel more comfortable like being closer connected to my 16-year-old self than I do to my 26-year-old self. I hated my 26-year-old self. My 26-year-old self was on a journey that I look back on and I'm like, glad you did it, but holy shit, I don't know if I would have done that again if I, in the hindsight, with the luxury of that.
The archetype of womanhood. Oh my God, you just opened up this beautiful, I would say can of worms, but that's not a really pretty analogy. Like rainbow of stuff. Okay.
A garden of herbs.
Thank you. I love that. Let's go with that one. So yes. And so I am embarking on my Empress phase of life, right? In the archetypal sense. And I have teachers, and I should shout out those teachers because I'm not coming up with this on my own. This is not original. So like Sarah Durham Wilson talks about it, and a few, others as well. And it'll land differently to different people depending on where you are in your experience. Well, I have an 8-year-old and I have a 14-year-old. So I'm still in mother. I'm still very much in mother. And we were just talking about this a little while ago too. And there's also some grief in letting part of that go. I don't have a toddler and a baby anymore, and I did for 10-year span of my life.
Yeah.
And on that, so building on that, getting into this new phase of life in this empresshood, and aging gracefully, and being appreciative of the fact that I'll be entering perimenopause soon, and all that. And so touching back to that teenager, Sarah Durham Wilson calls her the rebel genius. And usually in this time of our lives, because we're not that big in age, a big gap, is when the rebel genius shows back up.
I do feel like I'm in this time loop, but I think what's so beautiful about coming back to myself is all the wounds that I've been able to like heal for her. and really being able to know myself fully. And it's interesting because I wanted to ask you about, and I really don't know this, because you had mentioned you started your book about Lilith in the pandemic.
So
Or
I
you were writing
started
it.
realizing that the 3 books I had written, and I was
Yeah.
actually writing my third one, it was all the same character over an archetype of 18 years in reality. But this is all the same character. So I found a way to weave the 3 books together into one.
So so then did you spend like when did you start writing this series?
Oh my gosh, you would like 21 years old in France.
Okay. So you started
Very
writing
wounded
it,
maiden, very wounded maiden.
and you've
Or
been
maiden,
having
probably
this
maiden.
body of work that you'd been digesting and trying
Yeah.
to figure out where you were going to get to your publish point, right? And you got there, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
how old were you when you actually published your first book?
It was, my first book? The first one was in 2009.
Okay.
How old was I? 25-ish? 25-ish. Just shortly after. So that book, originally the first one was Flicker. So 21-year-old me started writing this book, and I had deliberately chosen to write a very surrealistic, like Alice in Wonderland journey about a young woman. Obviously, like we write what we know, right? About a young woman kind of navigating her way through. Well, it's crazy. Like she just goes through these crazy experiences, and at the very end, she comes up with her own different what is it called when you have your like not like a second persona, kind of
Like a alter ego?
alter ego. Yeah, she comes
Yes.
up with this kind of alter ego.
Story of my life.
Yeah, and known as Savage Girl. Well, Savage
Okay.
Girl is the one who comes out in the end. Right? She's the one who basically is walking in France and just lights it all on fire. And you see this image of this little girl, no, this maiden woman, like walking away from this. Right? So metaphorical.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of this at the time. I didn't have any of the language. I didn't know like any like maidenness, like none of that. So I wrote this thing, and it was cool, and I liked it, and it got good acclaim. And I went with Ex Libris Publishing, which was like an offshoot of like Random House or something like that. But they're like kind of self-publishing. And then I also did a book of prose, and that was great, and it did well. People were really receptive to it. But I was like, I'm not done with this story yet.
Yeah.
And
Because it's about you.
yeah, right. But I'm writing, and I'm writing in third person, so I'm able to objectify. I'm able to be like, oh no, it's about her, right? No. And her name originally was Paige. That was the character in that book. So I'm like, I want to write this, like, now I want to write a sci-fi mystery, like a sci-fi fantasy. Like I want to get weird, and I want space to be involved in it. And this is how this is going to be. Well, that was also at the time in my life. So 25 is when I published my first book. Immediately started working on my second one. But I was also doing that at the time where I was meeting who now is my husband, eloping, having babies. So I put this book up and down many, many times over the course of like another 5 years, right? And I remember finally being pregnant with my youngest in 2016 and being like, if I don't finish this now, it's never going to be done. And I'm like pregnant, I'm like about to pop. I'm like, I got to get this book done. So like I finished it, self-published it on Amazon, like done, just put it together. It was called Alpha Phoenix. And it was very, very like, very time travel-y, very sci-fi fantasy, right? But really what I wanted to write. And I was really proud of this product. And then, a couple years go by, and I'm in DGI, and I'm in a couple writing classes, and I'm like percolating. There's another book, there's another story, and it's the same character. I'm like, this character's coming back to haunt me. She just won't be done.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, fine, I'll do a continuation of that book, right? And then I was like, can I integrate that first one? I was like, well, the first one's kind of a maiden journey. And then I'm in this mother, and my next phase is Empress. And this is a very heroine's journey situation, right? So I'm like, okay. And I'm a little, as far as like more seasoned and like having done stuff. And so I start writing this, what I thought was like a sequel to that book. And then I found a way to weave the 3 in together. So I did this very intentionally, wrote that third chunk as the net. So it goes, my first book was the first part of this, Dark Star Reclaiming Lilith. The one I wrote, no, I'm lying. The Alpha Phoenix is the first part of the book. And then it's Flicker And then it's the third one that was a continuation because I was able to kind of meld that together. Obviously, I hired a developmental editor to help me flesh out these ideas.
Yeah.
And then when I was finally about to end and publish, I'm like, I'm done. Like, I just wrote it. I just finished it. Like, oh my God, the next step is to publish this. I did some self-reflection and was like, it took me 18 years to write this thing.
Yeah.
Because of the journey. Because it wasn't a sit down and flesh it all out. It was a journey. And then I was like, this is literally an adult. I am literally sending this adult woman out. And it's like bizarre because now I want to ask you about your process. But I'm in this new phase of kind of nurturing this idea for my next book. And again, having gone through all the experience that I've gone through to get to this place and then seeing what I'm seeing and knowing what I know and knowing that there's so much more to know and all this stuff, but also being able to verbalize and have the vocabulary around this new place is really intense. Like my next book, she is a doozy. And I chose to write her in first person.
Right. Which changes the psychology behind
Really?
the words that you're using. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like my main character is me, but not me. And it's like I'm so intimate with her, but I'm also trying to figure her out. And it's based on my own personal journals and my own life story, but because I'm trying to find ways to make it very clear to a reader of how her psychology development. So like my character has postpartum depression, all based on being a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault, and from a young age, and living a life through both childhood situations, adolescent relationships, and then a military career, and dealing with the complex post PTSD that she develops, and that all kinds of comes crashing down when she starts having to confront her own wounds in raising her daughters. Because every time they hit a certain age and every time they hit a developmental milestone, you know, you see yourself and you see what you had and what you didn't have, and you realize that you start behaving like your mother in more ways than you want to be. And if you're working on the motherhood wound, like it makes this perfect cauldron for disaster.
Yeah.
Like true collapse. And yeah, so like coming to this archetype of like writing in a first person, you have to kind of go crazy yourself if you're writing about the character going crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what you were touching on is like what is like the process that I've adopted is literally putting myself into memories that will trigger the fuck out of me, and then writing through them until it doesn't hurt anymore. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 and a half. Walked into a recruiter's office, and I was really inspired by a post 9/11 world and a collapsing economy of the 2006 to 2008 crash. And I didn't have a means for college, and I was really called to a service above self. And I had been really hurt. And I was looking to find a way to strengthen my resolve. To talk about writing as catharsis, I meticulously journaled my entire adolescent life. And I recently, as a part of my healing journey, my writing journey, I went back and I not only read my journals, but I actually transcribed my journals digitally, so that I can go back and I can reread them. I can analyze them. I can see myself from a lens of almost like academic perspective. And it makes me not so scary, because I think that's the thing is we get so scared of our own minds because we are the prisons of ourselves. I would say that I was scary. The things I was willing to put myself in, the situations I knowingly did to purposefully destroy parts of myself.
I understand that. Yeah.
You know, like I
Self-sabotage.
self-sabotaged on purpose in like I can't, if I don't do this, there's no other way to escape myself. Like I had to implode in order to make sense of anything because I had
Yes.
trapped myself. And going back to what you were saying earlier about
Yeah.
being, a public figure, I had made myself into a public figure. I had put my name on a piece of paper when I was 17 and a half, and I said, I will never, do drugs. I will never be gay, and I will never cheat on my spouse. That's my first chapter of my book. It talks about what it is to actually give those oaths away when you're that young, and then to not know, myself or realize the substance abuse that I had as a young person, and that I developed later on in my life, that I didn't know my sexuality when I was 17 and a half. And turns out it was really difficult for me to be married at 20 years old to a man, and being in a service where don't ask, don't tell was a thing. And then also in the military, it is punishable if you are if you have an affair, if you practice adultery. Like literally, it's something that you can be like punished in the service.
And those still accurate. That's still
100%. Yeah, it came around from like World War II, I believe, of like, there were too many people cheating on their spouses when they would like go into port. I don't know, but there's these oaths and these things that get put upon you very young, and you have to follow these oaths, because if you don't, and you're not on the right side of the boys club, you get fucked.
Yep.
And
See, this would be a good place to use that. Drop
Right.
that off, home.
That is a good place. I'm like, if I'm gonna use it, it's when the patriarchy stepped in. And like there were so many things too, as a young girl at 17 and a half, joining the service, looking for a sense of belonging, looking to find protection within myself, looking to find the strength in me so that I could protect myself in a hard world, that I had already known how hard it was. And like, I was naive to think that the Marine Corps, I was somehow joining a brotherhood and a sisterhood. I thought that I was joining something that it wouldn't matter that I was who I was, that I would be accepted because we were all part of this like greater organization. And it turned out true for periods of time, but then that was not the majority of time. And I go back to knowing myself and writing as catharsis, and going back to looking at my journals, is that I had developed this identity from a young girl that got married young to protect myself too. I was afraid of being who I am as a single young woman in the military. I had way more instances of feeling fear than I did of feeling safe. And so for me, I hid behind a relationship. And my relationship was also long distance. So it was this very strange dynamic that we've gone through in the last, our first 10 years together, my husband and I spent 7 years apart. Wow. And, there's a lot of time that I spent alone with myself, but I never was truthful to my husband because he was never really around me. So like I almost developed in isolation. I had such bad postpartum depression. I still struggle with it today, that if she goes into certain types of panic attacks, it triggers me. And it's very difficult for me to, I'm aware of what's happening. And it's like, it's taken me a lot of practice to not even go to a triggered state anymore.
But that's the magic in, is the awareness, because then you can be like, wait, no, I'm making a conscious decision.
Yeah. And I think we need to understand our conscious decisions. And tying that all back to catharsis and writing, that's when we talk about our conscious decisions, is when we like actually articulate to ourselves in these private, intimate moments of writing. This is a letter to myself. This is a letter from my psyche to my future self, to my past self, to a person that isn't in my orbit, but I have to say something and there's no one to listen to, but like it needs to get out. And as like a 17-year-old, I was journaling all of this stuff. And like I found a journal entry where I talked about the day I joined the military.
Wow.
and like why I was doing it and how aware I was at 17 that I was doing it because I didn't feel safe, that I was doing it with fear, that I didn't know what I would do in war, that I didn't know how I would stay true to myself. And, fast forward a decade of service, when I left active duty, I had developed such a persona for myself. I existed as a character, but who I presented in my community, in my neighborhood, with my friends, with my family, with my husband, with, business relations, that was never authentic. It was always a mask. And until I was able to figure out who the person inside was and then actually have a relationship with her and then start to introduce people to her, and the way I found to do that was through writing and sharing my character.
I think we're perpetually going through these cycles of life, right? And I know, because I'm about to I'm embarking on my midlife journey. And that's a big one in like teachings of midlife is like is throwing the Molotov cocktail, or like not even just that, or gradually burning it. What is the actual impetus in doing that? It's like you're trying to burn down these fake facades, these projections from, be it a military or society, or projections of like friends and family, or what people want you to be or look like, whatever. And it's like having to cut through all the bullshit to really get to the real, you, which again, like if you really look at it and you expose the shadows that people have, a lot of, it's generalizing. I can speak for myself and probably you, but like, you're not that bad. Like even the shadows aren't that bad. A lot of times they're trauma response. They're all, like
literally, yes. Yeah. I truly, when I look back at my life and the decisions that I have made that in the past I would have been shameful of admitting, that those were my realities. The only thing that, like, I realized I never truly had choice. That I wasn't acting with intention. I was being reactionary to stimulus in my environment. And based on that stimulus and based on my conditioning from traumatic events in my life, I have a lot of them, and I in all honesty too, it's like I have a lot of them, but like I'm not, it's not even the worst of what people have experienced, but I think what is important for all of us is that we have to figure out a way of making our youngest self, the parts that were traumatized, feel safe today.
100%.
And that has to be with our environment. It has to be with our community. It has to be with our relationship. It has to be in our place of work. And guess what? All of that requires privilege. And so it's really hard right now for people to break out of these bad cycles.
Yeah.
And I think the one place where we all can put some attention to is that catharsis through sitting with ourselves. Because if there's one way that we can heal in a safe space, it's going inside.
Yeah. And drawing out the archetypal inner mother, like the mother that you needed at 17 years old, walking into that.
How do you become her?
Yes, exactly.
Even that's when you see yourself being your mother. And I'll use an example of even this morning. My youngest has been, I have an 8 and a 6-year-old. And my youngest has really been struggling with wearing only like one clothing. Like she only wants to wear one thing for clothing. And it drives me nuts. Every time that would happen, I think of being 6 years old and my mother telling me that I had to wear this dress for this freaking event. And I refused to wear it. And my mother loves telling the story of how she took the dress and she was just like, well, fine. And she rips it off and all the buttons go everywhere. And she likes to say that I looked at her and I was like, oh, grandma's going to be upset at you because my grandmother had bought this dress. But I think of who my mother was at that time. My mother was not stable. My mother was highly emotional and unavailable. She was a single mom right after that. We went through a lot of trauma together. She had been traumatized extremely from her upbringing and her religious background and all this stuff that was like piled on her trying to raise me as being a pretty difficult young kid. And then I realized I'm doing the same impatience with my child, right? And so today, like my youngest, she threw a temper tantrum over the clothes, and I said, you know what? You can wear your other clothes, but I want you to try this new outfit. Just sit with it for 30 minutes. And at the end of 30 minutes, let's have a discussion. And all she needed to do was trust me that I would give her a choice after 30 minutes. And there was a lot of tears, but I never raised my voice. I never got defensive. I never went to a negative space with her. I just stayed calm. I gave her what we're going to do. I got her buy-in for it, and we did it. And at the end of the day, she was like, I still don't like these clothes. And I was like, fine.
But at least she tried.
She tried. And I
Yes.
told her, I was like, I'm so proud of you for trying.
Yeah.
So like that to me felt like such a tremendous needle forward, because it was like, not only did she do something new, but like I proved to myself that all the shit that we're going to be talking about, you know, is actually changing the way that I'm showing up as a parent, and I'm healing my postpartum depression, and I'm healing my complex PTSD, and I'm healing my motherhood wound. And I think that that is where we start to change society.
Yeah. In that moment, you were faced with a plethora of choices you could have made. And you chose to be present. You chose to have a certain temperament. You chose to acknowledge your daughter's like upset by remembering you at 6 years old. You made this conscious decision and you stuck by it, and you saw the results. As a child, I remember feeling like I missed my mom all the time because she wasn't around. She was working and trying to provide for her and I understand and have a lot of empathy for her now. And remembering that and trying to keep that kind of like at the surface level a little bit in my mothering to my children, I'm like, as long as I show up, first of all, show up. And then also, and now, especially because my time is very limited too. I'm a career woman at this point in my life also. So when I get the time with my family, and that I'm just checking in with the boys, like my boy, you know, and they're I have such sweet boys.
They really are.
They're
like that was like one of the things that I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to know this woman, because I have known a lot of boy moms before, and I have had a lot of issues as a mother of daughters already at only 8 and 6. I have already had a lot of bad run-ins with boys. And so for the fact that your kids were so polite, they were so sweet. Your oldest son was talking all about the airplanes when he learned that we were pilots.
Yeah.
Because my husband and I were, when we both served in the military, I flew C-130s and he flew MH-60 Sierra helicopters. And that's a whole other thing. But you can tell so much by a mother or a person by how their children like introduce themselves. And so, yeah, like then when I learned that that was like your son's jacket that you were wearing, that leather jacket, I was like, okay, like this family's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, that's another thing too.
Reflected.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've really, I think my favorite role in my life is definitely a mother. Like I didn't realize it. I always loved kids. I've always taught kids, loved kids, been around kids, teacher. But like until I actually embarked, and I started birthing children, my children early. I was 26 when I had my son. Like that's in today's world, that's pretty young.
I was also 26 or 28.
Yeah, and that's pretty young, right? Like you probably have friends who are just having children now.
Yeah.
Like that's more commonplace. Same here, and that's fine. I think in that context, it's like it helped. I'm sure having a baby that early, like that's maiden right there, really helped me heal some of those mother trauma, like the mother wounds I've had. You know, and also just like being able to like rise. I have this little human being I need to keep alive now. Like I better get my shit together, you know, and then enjoying the process, right? There's the duty part of it, and then there's the like the love and the joy and the watching this little person that you're like you're building.
Yeah, like for me, it's like, it kind of hit the high level notes. And during the pandemic, and this is where my book kind of drops my readers in. My book's called How the Fuck Did I Get Here? I drop my readers in the prologue into a pretty risque situation. The idea is to kind of catfish people. Mm-hmm. You put the reader into this kind of over-the-top situation, but then as you read the internalization of her and her backstory, you're like, wait a second, this doesn't connect. Mm-hmm. Like there's something deeper here going on. And the next chapter 1 sets you in the hells of postpartum depression. And for me, I was postpartum with my second. My daughter was literally ripped out from me by military medicine that induced me against my will. Like literally, my midwife, I came in for my 36-week appointment. And I had gestational diabetes that I was managing with diet. And I had that morning, like I always did, had my latte. And I went into my 36-week appointment and my blood pressure was just a little bit elevated. And so because I was had gestational diabetes, they wanted to like monitor and make sure my blood pressure went back down. And it did. But some order somewhere said that if you meet this blood pressure level and have gestational diabetes, you must be induced.
So you weren't even in charge of your own body?
Literally not. My midwife took my purse with my keys to my car. I'm not joking.
That's like holding hostage.
I literally was held hostage in my midwife's office at MCAS Miramar by my midwife. And then she called an ambulance to come get me. I was escorted out of my medical office into an ambulance where the technician was like, your blood pressure's fine. Like, they'll discharge you as soon as you get there. And I was so just overwhelmed with anger and fury at this woman that had been such an advocate for me on my first child and was so caring about me and my child and was only looking out for what was best for me. I just wanted to get out of that facility. So I got into the ambulance. I called my husband. I was like, meet me at the hospital. They put me into the doctor's office. I thought they were giving me an IV drip. It was Pitocin.
Oh my God. And no one told you that? That's insane.